Big reaction to this €500 million spend on logistical and military support. When you heard about that and Ireland's support of this, although taking that approach that financial support we offer does not breach our military neutrality, and this whole line that they're coming from there, that this abstention on the grounds that they would be uncomfortable with actually giving money directly for weapons. Does this surprise you, this shift, what we're hearing about?
Well, I think we have to bear in mind what's going to happen next, and I'll return to that momentarily. But our policy of neutrality is complex, as your previous contributor said. I mean, we contributed troops to the NATO operations in Afghanistan right back from 2002. So we do have flexibility to participate and support UN Security Council mandated NATO missions, UN Security Council mandated European Union missions. Now, I think those kind of resolutions will possibly change, and our position may shift with that. But let's be clear, there has been a kind of
again, you mean?
Yeah. Well, I think when I say what's going to happen next, so up to now, there's been a kind of false sense of security about Ukraine, a sense of optimism that the resistance has been somewhat effective against a faltering Russian offensive. The Russians have just been using their reconnaissance units to identify and probe the cities of Kharkiv, Mariupol, Kyiv. In the next week, we're going to see the Russians bring up their main forces, and they're going to destroy those cities in depths. And we're going to have thousands and thousands of civilian casualties, as was the case in Grozny, the capital of Chechnya. We saw how the Russians targeted civilian targets like hospitals and other heavily populated areas in Syria. There has been no mention of humanitarian evacuation corridors, which is an obligation that would be placed on the Russians. So when things now really start to deteriorate, as they will in the coming week, then you're going to see the European Union mobilised in a way that we haven't seen since the end of the Second World War. And that is because this is not just a fight for Ukraine. This is now a fight for Europe, our shared values and our democracy.
Yeah, I sense from what you're suggesting now is what we could see in the very near future, within a week or two, is that this expands to a Europe-wide war.
No.
Not
so
beyond
that's the thing that we have to try and avoid is escalation.
No, but that what we are likely to see is an expansion by Russia in what they're doing. This idea that Ukraine are putting up a good fight, you believe that's going to be short-lived?
Absolutely, because the Russians are going to go into the cities, into the centres, and it's going to involve combat in the urban environment, and that involves street by street, house to house fighting of the type we've seen in Chechnya, of the type we've seen in places like Fallujah and another city. But this is now going to happen in Europe, and the Ukrainians are going to pay a very high price for this, and you're going to have thousands of Russian soldiers will be killed. And that's why I say the pressure on Vladimir Putin is going to increase. And despite protests throughout Russia, I think the way their system works, it's the people in his inner circle. He's now committing Russia to an unsustainable, unwinnable war. But it has the capacity to destroy all of the participants to that conflict, particularly if they escalate and particularly if they, carry out that threat to use a tactical nuclear weapon or thermobaric weapons. Like, this is a very, very dangerous and febrile situation.
Peadar, you say that this move by the EU is an unprecedented in terms of a step in providing a massive arms package in Ukraine. You're concerned about the move. You think it should be debated in the Dáil?
Well, first of all, I think from an Irish perspective, I do welcome the decision by the government to abstain from lethal force being given. And the reason being, first of all, we haven't exhausted the humanitarian efforts that we should be involved in for a start. So there's going to be a big refugee crisis on the borders of Ukraine. We should be at the heart of helping there. Even at the moment in the cities at the heart of Ukraine, there's problems with medical devices and oxygen. Yeah. We should be helping in that regard.
Do you have a problem with what we're doing and what we're doing to date, i.e. that line that, as somebody asked the question, you're funding the fuel for the tank but not the tank itself when it comes to Ireland's participation in all of this?
I would caution the government going any further in provision of lethal force, and the reason being as well is because Ireland has a proud history of neutrality. And we can be honest brokers in the de-escalation process too. We can be activists in the de-escalation process too.
There has been criticism that we're not going far enough within your own party, Emer Higgins. We've had Neil Richmond come out and say, you know, that we should be more aligning ourselves to the likes of Sweden and Finland and what's happening there, where they are ostensibly neutral countries, but they're taking a stronger stand and they are, you know, funding the military.
Ireland is a neutral country, but we are taking a side on this. We're not on the side of evil. We're on the side of the innocent people who are in bunkers right now, who are going to war for their country. And that's why we're taking the actions we've taken so far in terms of waiving visas for Ukrainians into Ireland, in terms of sending aid, €19 million in aid to the Ukraine, closing our airspace to Russian forces, freezing Russian money, freezing Russian assets, and those really strong sanctions. And Claire, they're important too, because those
they are, and I think people recognise the importance of the economic sanctions.
They're the way to stop.
I'm wondering about something Eamon Ryan's saying today, that if we were to do more, and if we were to directly, you know, send arms, as it were, that it could compromise our peacekeeping. Do you think it could? You're laughing at that.
I am, yeah, because it's a load of nonsense. Tom is absolutely correct. What is happening at the moment is that there are certain types of Russian forces have went ahead and have reached various cities. Anyone who's familiar with Russian military and its history will know what is about to happen now is their conventional armed forces and their the strong arm of their military will begin shelling those cities. There's a cultural issue with them attacking Kyiv because it's the birthplace of Russian Christianity. For the past, you know, culturally there will be a difficulty with their troops doing that. But the Russian military is political. It's not a professional army. It stands to protect the Kremlin. It follows their orders. General Gerasimov, the head of the Russian armed forces, is not someone who is going to stand up to the Kremlin or to Vladimir Putin and say no. There's an awful lot of analysis on Russian history, Russian military intentions and their intelligence services that is quite frankly nonsense, and it's naive. They have chosen to invade Ukraine. They're going in with a specific objective. And if you look at the history of Russia's interventions in invading countries, even back to Soviet times, there's no real history of them pulling out due to international sanctions or anything else. We're in a very dangerous situation, and there will be, I would predict, catastrophic amounts of consequences in the next week or two. I think it's only a matter of time before they start shelling many Ukrainian cities.